Welcome, everyone, to Stubborn Praise. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks for being here on an evening when we're deciding that it's actually an appropriate title for what we're doing and how we're living. And just a few notes. One is that you won't see yourself. It's a webinar format. So just in case you're worried about not seeing yourself, you won't. There are still ways though to engage with us. One, as many of you have already discovered, is through the chat. And if you have comments that you want to just kind of stream along with us, please do right there in the chat bar. If you are one of those people who's super bothered by the chat, you don't have to look at it. You can exit out so that it isn't distracting for you. And then if you do have a question, I'm going to suggest that you go ahead and put questions in the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen. And we'll know that if there's a specific question that you're hoping that we address, we'll be able to find it there in the Q&A. So conversation things in the chat, questions in Q&A, although I don't think we're promising any answers tonight. So
We might ask a lot of follow-up questions to your question.
questions and asking more questions is Q&A
That's
maybe.
right. That's right.
Hey James, let's start with maybe talking about stubborn praise.
Absolutely. So we usually like to give a little primer of how the name of this was born. And so I think we did this when you were out here for readings in Vermont too, Rosemary. I think we talked about stubborn praise. But basically, I'm pretty sure Rosemary wrote a poem called Stubborn Praise first, and then it got in my head and I forgot that she wrote it. And then I wrote one called Stubborn Praise. And I think that we just ended up deciding that this was our way of approaching the world, that, we're both very different people, but we both have personalities that I think want to uplift, praise what we can, honor, love, seeing the praises of the darkness while also welcoming the light. And I think that's the two hinges there of that phrase, stubborn praise. So it's living in with the difficult, with the darkness that must come into our lives, and also praising what's going well, praising the light, even praising the difficult because we don't know where it might lead us. Who's to say what's good or bad? Some days that feels more true than others, to be honest with all of you. And I think it's a way of living. It's also a way of writing for me, and I think for Rosemary too. And Rosemary, with her daily poems that she posts on her blog, 100 Falling Veils, yes, she's finding a way to praise and honor whatever shows up. And as I've said, I think before, encountering Rosemary and her work just felt like this long, easy sigh, this breath, like, oh, I too can meet so many of my moments with poems and not worry too much about where they end up or who's appreciating them, just letting it be a way of approaching and processing the world.
Are we done? Like that was everything. You just
Yeah, so I think we're going to wrap up.
that was it. That was it, James. That was so beautifully said. Um, I think in your poem too, the stubborn praise, your poem, Stubborn Praise, which I think you're able to in that moment. Oh, I know. I know what it was. It was a moment that you had recently where you and Brad had put your jackets down and somebody had sat down in your chairs and you
Mhm.
were fine. You were also finding this other definition of stubborn praise in that moment when someone had literally been rude, outright rude.
Mhm.
And you were redefining in that moment what it was to show up and stubbornly praise too. Am I right about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, actually, it was very surprising that it happened because it happened at a cafe actually in Quebec on one of our last days there. And Canadians are famously polite for the most part. They follow rules. And so maybe these people were from elsewhere, but we put our coats down because the cafe was really crowded and then went up to order. And then I turned around and these two people were sitting in our spots with their coats resting over our coats. And my instant response was really just surprise, like, what? Didn't they realize, didn't they see the coats? Like, I just really am confused by this. And so then I went over and tried to explain, like, no, no, we are saving these seats. And that didn't have any effect whatsoever. They just lifted off their coats, put our coats, sort of hung it on the edge, like, here you go, and we're done with you. And so it was just very surprising. And yet, once the sort of like offense and reactivity wears off, it's like, oh, well, this is different. It's like a little awakening.
Mhm.
Like this has changed the tenor, the course of this next hour and this whole day. Um and so yeah, I was feeling the stubborn praise even in that moment.
I love that. Well, it occurs to me also that Hello Stubborn Praise, this original program was going to be held in October. And it's kind of funny that our theme was change and transformation because we did have to change,
Mm,
not necessarily because we wanted to, but because of external circumstances. And then, so hello, change.
mm,
And and now, here we are again. And I think in a time that's also charged with change and transition, with the changing of the year, the calendar year, which is always big, the changing of the seasons, moving into past the solstice and into this. Now we're coming to that change of here's, the days have been getting shorter, soon longer again. So multiple changes, that are happening all around us in very obvious ways. So it's kind of a lovely time. And as I was preparing for tonight, James, I found so many poems and so many themes. I got way too excited and have way more than an hour and a half worth of ideas for us.
You have more poems than necessary. I'm shocked by that, utterly shocked.
Perhaps, perhaps.
Oh gosh. Well, would you like to read one?
Let's start. And okay, I'm going to start with one that is from All the Honey, and I guess it's thinking about how there one of the themes, so much is about how we change. I think that that's a big part of it, is how we are asked to change. Of course we are. But there's also how we don't change. How do we continue to show up as things change around us? So I guess that showing up, that choosing to show up, is the thing that doesn't change, even as the rest of the world does. So this is the only one I chose tonight out of All the Honey, but it's instructions for perseverance, and it has an epigraph from my beloved friend Holiday Mathis, who's a marvelous astrologer. So if you don't have horoscopes by Holiday in your paper, you can look it up online, or but on this particular day, December 19th, ooh, so close. It would have been tomorrow. Um, December 19th, 2020, Holiday wrote for Scorpios: think less, trust your inner animal. It's the chickadee that saves me today. Though the world gets cold, the chickadee stays. Despite snow, despite frost, despite lack of sun, it doesn't leave the winter land. Oh, tough little bird who sticks around, who thrives in any weather, whose cheerful tune spirals like hope through the frigid folds of December, as if to say, let it come. I can sing through anything. Let it come.
So beautiful.
You know, that line, that little line, let it come. Maybe some of you know my friend Craig Childs, who's really beautiful nature writer, adventure nature writer, I suppose. But I remember during COVID, he said to me, let it come. And I thought that was the bravest thing I had heard anyone else say around what was happening in the world at that time. And there was a huge change, right? Traumatic change happening, painful, traumatic change happening. And Craig Child stood there in the middle of it and said, let it come. And gosh, I was gobsmacked by that. So then to wonder what is it in us that allows us to meet that change in a way, like Rilke says, in Sonnets to Orpheus, want the change is Joanna Macy's translation of it. But my new favorite translator of Rilke, Marcus Burroughs, says, desire the change. Holy cow, is that brave? So to desire change, what do we have to do? You know, to meet it, we have to become chickadee like, right? And think, I've got it. I've got this. I'm going to keep showing up no matter what happens. I'm going to keep singing. I'll keep singing. I mean, I think in a way that's like what we were talking about earlier, James, around poetry. I'll keep writing poems. I'll keep showing up. It's changing and changing. Oh my gosh, it's cold. Oh my gosh, things are going on and it's difficult. I'm going to keep showing up and I'm going to keep singing.
Mm.
Let it come. Holy moly, what a prayer.
Yeah, and how to desire the change when the change that comes seems impossible or unbearable.
Yeah, right. How do
Mm.
we desire it then?
Mm.
Later in that same poem, then Rilke says, become the becoming.
Mm.
So it's like we hitch a ride on it, right? We allow ourselves to become it, even though it's in that moment nothing we could ever want or ask for. I'm sure we're going to go there later tonight,
Mm.
well, even right now, but even more so later. How when the change is so difficult, how do we get on board?
Mm. Yeah, and I'm thinking maybe just the desire to desire change is to desire to be changed always, and to invite that as a continuous state, whether we're living our lives or we're showing up to the page. I think, to always to not be attached to any one subject or style, or like this is how I've always shown up, so this is how I must show up, which always gets me into trouble. Um, I was thinking about this even before we talked about doing the change theme back in October. There was a meditation teacher that I worked with, and he's based in Minneapolis, but he teaches all over, Mark Nunberg, and he's sort of in the insight meditation tradition. And I just remember one Dharma talk he gave or something. I think it was even off the cuff, but he was pointing to a statue of the Buddha that was on a shelf behind him, and he was sort of dismissive and saying, if we could really create a visual symbol of something, it would be a symbol of change. That is what we would worship, because that is the only thing you can count on.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And that has always stayed with me. I've always loved that sentiment and tried to live into it, and failed and tried again.
Well, to that point, Wendy Vidlock, who lives here on the Western Slope, also beautiful poet, in Poetry Magazine quite a few years ago, she had a poem that began, "Change is the new improved word for God."
Mm,
So very
yeah.
much like what he was saying,
Mhm.
it is the most powerful thing. If we could have a symbol, would it be that? Yeah.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, and if there's something that we would bow to, I think that would be.
And then, all right, going back to that Rilke poem, the same one. This is still Sonnets to Orpheus, and that one, desire the change. In the end, Daphne, it says, let's not go into the mythology of it because that feels like a big sidetrack, but please go find this poem, friends. It starts want the change or desire the change. And Daphne, who's turning into a tree, she's becoming a tree as a way to save her. Her father's saving her from being raped. Um, she asks you to become the wind, which is something that changes, constantly changes. So that invitation at the end of that poem to become the thing that changes, that
Mm,
that is ever changing and that changes the world also.
yeah, in larger and smaller ways.
Yeah.
Well, I'll read an older poem actually about change. This, in looking through my own poems, I realized I had way too many about change as well. And so
Changes.
this was really easy. I could have just done a search for change. Of course, that's not what I did. But so this is just called To Change. And I think the meditation teacher's words were in my mind, even though this is not completely about that. So this is called To Change. Then came the rainy day at the height of summer in the middle of my life, when I knew I would have to build an altar to change.
Mm.
No mudslide had toppled the house. No trees had fallen to block the roads out of town. I simply woke to the sound of rain on the driveway, saw a curtain of it falling in front of my open window, and a small puddle forming on the hardwood floor. I dipped my toes into the cold water, and without even a shiver, understood that change was the only God I could ever worship. No bells rang out, no peal of thunder rumbled the room. The rain just kept on slicking the concrete, falling on the scorched grass and making it seem greener in the grayish first light.
It's such a sweet entrance into that poem, how you place us there, that it's summer, where
Mm,
you're at in your life.
mm,
As my professor used to say, you got the weather right.
mm.
And isn't it sweet how it was the rain in the middle of the summer that helped this very quiet epiphany? It's so ordinary. It's presented in such a tender, quiet, gentle way.
Yeah, which is not my style at all. It's a real departure for me. No, I really appreciate that. It was really hard. I wanted to convey that it doesn't have to take the large things to make change come about, but I think it's often the large things and sometimes the really hard and horrible things that kind of cement these ideas or these insights that we have. Um, I would love to think that we can only learn through joy. People often talk about like, well, we learn so much through grief. Can't we learn through joy? I think we learn through both. But it's sort of like joy that is the opening and the grief that allows us deeper to go deeper and to fully receive
Mhm.
whatever the message is. And the message here for sure is change.
Well, it's interesting because you do invoke the big dramatic things that didn't happen,
Right.
right? That might have forced that kind of an awareness on you. I need to have an altar for change.
Mm.
And yet it is still that. See, I think, James, that more than anything maybe is part of why a poetry practice is valuable in a way, right? It allows for that kind of very intimate, small moment to have a pretty large epiphany attached to it, right? Is because in meeting a moment, you're meeting all of life in a way, right? To
Mm,
meet the world in a drop of dew. I forget the Blake line. I just massacred it. I'm so sorry, William Blake. But I think that the part of the gift of showing up to write a poem over and over and over and over is that profound noticing of it doesn't take getting hit over the head with the tree that just fell.
mm.
It could be as simple as a rainy day that helps you think, oh, what's here? What's here?
Yeah. Yeah. And even leaving the window open, and that's how the insight comes, right? That it was left open a crack just enough for that rainwater to get in, to be this shock of cold
Mhm.
on the feet, on the floor. Yeah, and Jane Hirschfield has said, I often quote her saying this, but leave the window open a little more than is comfortable. But I think leave the window open at
At
all. Like
all.
just leave it open. It could be a crack, it could be the whole window open. But I think that that is where it's how the world gets in. It is how we are changed. And we do so often want to protect ourselves from change, even, slight change, let alone really drastic change or, difficult news of the world or personal news. So I get wanting to keep the window closed, but I think we just learn so much more keeping it open and also staying open to surprise, which is another way of saying like that willingness, that desire to be changed.
Mhm. Yeah. Leave the window open. I guess that's a really beautiful metaphor, really, for what a poem is, right? Sitting down to write a poem is a metaphorical way of leaving the window open.
Hmm.
That's beautiful. Thanks, James. Thanks, Jane. Double J. That almost rhymes. That's kind of nice.
Someone was asking if I knew that it was the middle of my life. I think I was just assuming that, this was written in my 30s, and so
Uh,
odds were it was in the middle of my life. I think I was honestly trying to echo Dante a little bit. um, yeah. My own youthful
nice.
pretensions.
Um, well, all right, here's another one. I'm competing, but here's one. It's called Never the Same, which is, I guess, in a way, talking about how we like to think, oh, that's the frame that'll explain it, right? Oh, it's a window that's opening. Oh, it's like we think, oh, now I've got it. And we just want to rest there and just stay there for a while. But no, that we don't get to rest and stay there. So here we go. Never the same. And this poem isn't in a book. I don't have further. None of the poems I'm going to read after this are in books. They're all just poems. They're all on my blog. You can find them all at 100fallingveils.com. But never the same. Sometimes a person wakes believing they are a storm. It's hard to deny it. What with all the rain pouring out of the gutters of the mind, all the gusts blowing through, all the squalls, all the gray. But by afternoon, it seems obvious they are a garden about to sprout. By night, it is clear they are a moon, luminous, radiant, faithful. Well, that's the danger, I suppose, of believing any frame. Let me believe then in curiosity, in wonder, in change. Let me trust how essential it is to stumble into the trough of the unknown. Marvel how trough becomes wings, becomes faith, becomes math. Let me trust uncertainty is a sacred path.
Mm. Mm.
Your little altar of change is like right there in the center of my poem.
That's right. True. Mm. Yeah. Just marinating in that. Yeah. How can uncertainty be a path? How can we just let it be? Yeah. Mm.
Well, and I think the longing to know something and how I think about this all the time. In fact, I don't know if you've seen it before, friends, but I have a TED talk on changing metaphors. And I suppose that's really what's at the heart of this poem is being willing to change our metaphors, being willing to change the way that we're seeing any situation, including ourselves, you know, uh, and to just kind of listen for what those metaphors are because they dig so deep into us. We think I'm fighting this, I'm fighting this sick, cold. Listen to that. We've created a I'm a warrior kind of frame, right? I'm a fighter. I'm gonna kill it. I'm gonna beat this. That's what we say. I'm gonna beat this. And then notice, is that the frame that's serving me right now? Is that serving me? Is there another frame that might serve me? I'm learning from this. It's teaching me. Or I'm dancing with this. Or, I just think there's so many other possible frames, but we don't even hear the frame sometimes, or we do, and we settle in and we're like, that feels good.
Yeah. And often because it feels familiar, or it's just a habitual way of framing something or talking about something. It often comes down to language so much, how we're holding these moments of our lives and how we're giving image. We don't even think of saying, I'm fighting a cold, I'm battling, this or that disease as creating a metaphor, but it is very real. And, I can't pretend that I would welcome certain diseases or certain sicknesses. And, if we're talking about something as simple as a cold that is maybe not as threatening, it's like, well, some things are messages. So can I welcome the message to
Mhm.
slow down, to rest, to, let this work through my body? And sort of an integration, I think. And letting go. I mean, it's this continual letting go of like, well, this metaphor served me for a while. This way of thinking of things served me for a while. And I think you're right, Rosemary. That's why a poetry practice is so important, because if we are regularly showing up to the page as we can, whatever that means for us, doesn't have to be every day, could be whenever you feel moved. But if you do kind of obey that desire to change, um, to show up to the page, then I think you will find new metaphors. You will find new ways of framing your world. And I think you'll really find ways that your world is holding you, speaking to you, communicating with you constantly. But there's something about writing it down that allows us not just to hold on to it, but even to remember it in
Mhm.
the first place. I think I have trouble um, remembering it, not forgetting.
That's true. I think that's really true. That to write it down it is to is to get to remember it for a moment, right?
Mm.
But then to know that the next time we sit down, then something else could be equally or more true, right? So I think there's that constant willingness to say, well, what's true now? What's true now? Each time we meet a blank page, it's blank. I mean, what a freaking gift. again and again and again, meet a blank and get to wonder what's true now. What's true now?
Mhm.
And then in that moment of wondering, in that moment of curiosity or openness or awe or vulnerability or authenticity, all those yummy ways of being are all available to us in that moment. All those enlivening ways of being, so that we can again and again wonder. And I think it's that wonder that allows for the metaphor shifting. It allows for the frame to shift. You know, if the word metaphor isn't in any way off-putting to anybody, just thinking about it then as a frame. You know,
Mm.
I'm a mother. You know, well, that's true right now. Yeah. But, you know, is there another frame that's essential now? Or does that change? That one feels pretty static at the moment. Let's hope it stays that way. But, you know, I think that, you know, like, I'm happy. Let's just take that as I'm happy. I'm a happy person. But you sit
Mm.
down to the blank page and something just happened that wasn't in any way happy. And you get to meet, oh, I'm this also, or I'm this in more so, I'm this right now. You know, just the way we get to meet it again and again by wondering what's here, what's true now, what's true now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and inviting the becoming a new creation. I think we're always in the midst of that, shedding layers, becoming something new. Um, this poem's coming to mind, so I'll go ahead and read this. As I told Rosemary before we started, this poem is called How to Let Go, which feels very appropriate for this week when I feel like I've been holding on too tightly. So this is How to Let Go. Let go of who you think you are and sink back into the bareness of being as fat white flakes paper down from a sky crowded with clouds. See how the dried out husks of cone flowers hold their burden of snow, letting it slide off like an old name or a habit that no longer fits. Every flower in winter becomes a crown of seeds, blossom of pure potential in these coldest months. Just as you are a collection of moments, each one as blank as the snow now blanketing the yard, waiting to be changed by the imprint of every step you take.
Mm. Oh, isn't that interesting how the yard itself is waiting to be changed and we're the agents of change in that moment?
Mm, yeah. And yet we are also changed.
And yet we're also changed.
Mhm,
It was such an interesting line where you had how the snow is slipping off like a habit,
mhm. Yeah.
how difficult it is to let our habits slide off.
Mm. But I think, yeah, we think it's just like a one time only thing. Like, oh, it slides off. There goes that habit. But no, the snow keeps coming. And there goes that habit again. And there goes the same habit. It's this constant sliding off, just like when we have those labels or those identities, that that we cling to, or that just become part of our DNA and part of who we are. I think no matter what happens, you'll always be a mother, but the practice of that, what that'll look like, will always change. I have lost both of my parents, but I'll always be a son. It's just that's going to look different. And so it's not necessarily letting go of the full labels themselves, just what the labels mean,
Mhm.
the practice of those labels. And I wrote this poem, I think, very much from a place of grief and feeling like I still don't know entirely who I am, especially having lost my mother, because for so long I was her son, her caregiver, always needed. And now it's so different to not always be needed by someone. That's such a change. And so it's like there is that sense of relief or the sigh of the snow sliding off, the heads of those flowers, and then it piles back on, like I miss that. I want that. I kind of crave that. And then it slides off again. So I'm really glad you pointed to that line.
Well, I want when you wrote it, do you remember this? I don't know if you would even remember, but even reading it now, is there a line that surprises you? You
Mm,
read it and you're like, oh,
mm. Well, I was surprised by the sort of slant rhymey sound of blank and blanketing. That blank is somehow embedded in the word blanket.
yes.
That really surprised me. And also, like what we were saying about the blank page, I also get excited by the blank page, by just, that snowy yard, everything's kind of covered. It looks so softened and gentle now. And yet there's a way like that the blankness can press down, can be that heavy sort of blanket. It can be the thing that's comforting, that keeps us warm, and the thing that feels a little smothering at times too. Um, the overwhelming blankness.
Oh, that's so right. How it can be both freeing and constricting or overwhelming or
Mhm.
repressive.
Yeah,
Hello, paradox.
yeah, exactly. Just when you change your metaphor, you find this side and this side. The blanket is warm, cozy, comforting. The blanket is constricting, smothering, overwhelming. Yeah.
And there it is. And there it is. And how they are both true at the
Yes.
same time.
Yeah.
This is always one of my favorite things about poetry is how it really does invite us to into spaciousness, right? Where both realms are possible at the same time. And we really inhabit the impossibility of that is not just possible, but real. It's what it is. Even though our brain is like, no, it couldn't possibly be. And yet,
Yeah. I think our brains sometimes also want it to be this one way so that it is controllable,
yep,
predictable. It's that sort of familiar piece of clothing or jacket that we can just slide on that feels so good.
yeah,
Um, and it is for a while. And then you see things in a new way. It's sort of like a friendship that has run its course. And, for a while, like I just wrote a poem about my dear friend that, talking about how the conversation felt like this favorite wool peacoat that I have. And um, just putting it on all those memories, and yet some relationships do run their course, and so the frame changes. How we see things
yeah,
absolutely changes, and it is funny how in the changing seasons of our lives we do have to, or at least we are invited to honor that, to just continually keep up with that change. I don't know why I keep thinking of things from meditation teachers, but something else comes to mind. When I was at Insight Meditation Center, which is in our society, I think it's in Barre, Massachusetts, not far from here. And one of the teachers was telling a story. I think he was in Burma, working with this meditation teacher through a translator. And he said he kept showing up every day, and the teacher would say something, and he sort of sensed like, this is profound. He's giving me a teaching. And then the translator would say, something like, work harder, meditate more, work harder. So he would go, he would meditate more, extend his hours, sit longer. And then later he learned that the teacher wasn't saying that at all. The teacher was saying, in response to these struggles that he was bringing to their conversation, the teacher was saying, please be more continuous. And I just think that's so interesting. The idea of continuity, and not that everything has to stay the same, but that we are just keeping up with the changes
Mhm.
as they're happening. We're not getting stuck in like, well, I want this to be true. I want the past to still be true. We're just continuing, like
Mm.
that path from the poem you just read.
Please be more continuous, friend, is what James had said. And I feel like that was the maybe the heart of the let it come, sing like a chickadee, I can sing through anything. Is that continuous how we meet change, or even like Rilke was saying, become the becoming.
Mhm.
Uh it seems like it's talking to the heart of that teaching too. Isn't that funny that it was oh, translation.
Yeah.
uh Friends, I don't know that we said this, but our program's going until 7 o'clock. And so I think that, or seven to the hour, to whatever hour is the next hour for you. So I
Right.
think James and I will continue this way, reading and talking, and we'll open it up for questions. So if you do have questions as we go ahead and put them in the chat bar, and we'll not in the chat bar. No, thank you. Sorry. In the Q&A where so we can be sure to find them. And then we'll have, maybe 15-20 minutes at the end for just that kind of conversation, opening it up to everyone. I thought maybe reading one about unwanted change that happens, who would ever ask for it, and showing up for that. The title of this poem is Catalysis, which is if you're a chemist, chemical reactions can be sped up with a catalyst. So it's just the catalysis is the acceleration of a reaction because of a catalyst. Any chemistry student can tell you a substance that undergoes transformation must first be torn apart. I have been torn apart. I have felt the breaking, the rearranging, and now the rebuilding of my bonds. I marvel at the brand new molecules, how they transform from despair to openness. Though I look the same and sound the same, there is no mistaking that I am forever changed, but not by sorrow. No. Sorrow is the catalyst that speeds it all up. But it is love absorbed that is breaking the bonds, and love that evolves as new bonds are made. Some days I feel it. I am less what I was and more whatever it is that drives the autumn, the spring. Every day, the chance for love to find its way in. And each time, love helps me to meet the unmeetable, the reactant of self becomes offering.
Yeah, it's interesting that you read that one because maybe I got this from your poem too, but I was talking with my husband Brad about, just being this sort of standing liquid as we are. And then anytime we introduce that catalyst, that bit of change, the chemical solution can't help but be altered. And it's continually altered and continually altered, and it doesn't even have to be something major. It's this little step in this direction, or this choice to do this, or to pick this up, or whatever it is. It just is. It can be very slight, and it absolutely changes the whole composition.
Yeah.
So I love that aspect of it, and I also love that you were changed into openness, into offering.
Yeah.
So there's this sort of, not like It was dark, now there's light. There was sorrow, now there's joy. It's just openness, offering, you know. So that feels very true to me.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, catalysis, CatalYsis, Catal YSIS. The, I think I was just like you were saying, like you were talking about with Brad. I remember James right after Finn died, I had this very physical awareness that I was being transformed. Like in I was so aware of it. There was no pretending it wasn't happening, and it was so, it felt like, and it was really like this, like every single cell had been kind of cradled with love. Like every single individual cell had love come and cushion around it, so that there was like this, all the catalyst of sorrow came in, right? You're broken, but then all the love that came in, and I truly felt like they were all, every cell of me was humming, every molecule was getting rewired
Yeah.
by love. By love. It was so clear to me that that was what was happening, that it was this love coming in, that it was the love I had for my son, that it was the love I had for the people who were all around me loving me. It was a very powerful, um, complete rewiring that took
Mm,
place over a long period of time. I just kept feeling it, feeling it, feeling it. This, and still not like it's something finished, although certainly it's nothing like what it was. I mean, that was so full body energetic constantly all the time. But the awareness then that it was sorrow as catalyst, that's what made it happen right away. Like you were saying, like the
mm,
trees that fell, or didn't fall, right? But that would have caused an immediate change. That was catalyst, but it wasn't the change itself. That the change itself, that the reactant and even the product, both were love.
mm.
That was so astonishing to me to feel, to live into, to continue to live into.
Where was the love coming from?
Oh, everywhere, sweet man.
Mm,
I did have, sounds so wacky. I had this vision, it's so weird, but here it goes, that I could see all these beams of like laser light coming from people all over.
mm,
I'm sure people on this call, I'm sure from you, from
mm,
people I didn't even know, just like love that was like red lasers that all went up to this one giant red sparkling
mm.
crystal, like the Death Star, really only the Love Star. And then I was aware of it coming like this out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, friends, all, this is the really whacked out woo-woo part of this program, but here it is. I really did feel it come then, like it all gathered in one place and then came directly to me, laserishly into my heart, like, and I felt it, like just woo, and I was like humming with it for months and months. So I guess I
Mm,
really was aware, James, that there was like somehow all this love that was around, latent. Like it was latent. It wasn't like it just showed up. It was like it's always there somehow. It just got focused.
mm. The opening too. Yeah.
The opening. And it,
Mhm,
it was like, ah, there's work to be done. Those are the sound effects. I'm making fun of it a little bit. I don't mean to be flip about it because it was
Yeah.
something so sacred, so powerful. Uh,
Mhm,
what a beautiful question. Where is the love coming from, right? I was aware that it was coming from all over. and it was coming from individual people, but aware that it was somehow also just love itself
Mhm.
doing the work of love.
Yeah. Yeah, the same love, it's not an individualized love. The love that I was sending you was the same love that so many of the people that you know and care about were sending you at the same time. And so perhaps that is part of that vision when someone senses you need that. And I think we do need that when we're being changed, whether we're losing someone, whether we're going through a different sort of grief, we need each other. And to be that open, I think is a beautiful thing, because sometimes it's easy to close off because it can feel overwhelming. That's the blanketing kind of thing. Like, um the other side of that love shooting at you is that's a lot of energy coming at you,
Oh,
I would
sweet
imagine.
man, it was so overwhelming, and I actually tried to stop it. I really
Mm,
did. Like there was a moment, but it was only a moment when I was like, no, 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 too much, too much, too much.
mm,
And then I didn't have a chance, right? Like love was just like, sorry, sweetheart, here you go. It like obliterated any of my no. That's how it felt. It really, I was so aware of being for a while, like, oh, no, no, no. And then not, it was out of my hands. I
right.
couldn't resist it if I wanted to.
Mm,
Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
yes.
But you're just like you say, yeah. I mean, I think only because I couldn't do anything, right? I couldn't do anything. So even resisting love was too much to do.
Mm, yeah. Mm, yeah, that's another willingness to be changed, but it's almost like no other choice but to be changed, because you don't have the energy to resist or just do anything else, to turn away from it, to be distracted from it, whatever.
No
um,
choice but to be changed.
mm, yeah. Well, this is bringing to mind a poem of mine. The World Loves You Back. I know Rosemary has heard me say this one before, but this one actually, written, it sounds very like light and bright, and it is in a way, but I think it was also written out of grief. And even though my mother is not mentioned in it, I think it was written for her almost retroactively, or for other people like her, because she lived a very hard life and didn't have a lot of kindness and tenderness and love early in her life. And I always wanted to fix that for her, as I want to fix it for anyone who's in that situation. So this poem came one day as I was sitting out on my back porch, where I often feel my mother near, and looking out at the blooming Tithonia, or Mexican sunflowers. So this is The World Loves You Back. Even if no one ever touched you with the tenderness you once needed, believe the world's been holding you in its arms since the day you were born. You are not an accident or afterthought. Let rain on the roof remind you. Let sun on the skin, or the neon orange of a Mexican sunflower at which a hummingbird pauses to drink. There are so many ways to hold and be held, and you could spend your whole life counting them up without ever reaching the end of the list. And I don't have many of my poems memorized, but for whatever reason, that poem lives with me.
Oh, it's such a blessing of a poem to hear it,
Mm,
to remember how the world rises up to hold us. Maybe not in the ways we expected.
mm,
As you say at the end, there's you could spend your whole life counting the ways and never get to the end of the list. So we think I'm not being held, but maybe it's just we're
mm,
not being held the way we thought we would be.
mm. In the way we want to be. Yeah. And it does seem like there's a choice in there too, that, I don't say it as presenting a choice in that poem, but it's like you could spend your whole life counting them up or not, you know? And I'm not saying it's always easy or even always possible in every moment and every day, um, but yeah, I think it is a choice. It is a choice to some
Mm.
degree.
What do you think helps you make that choice yourself?
Hmm. Honestly, I often turn to the writing to do that for me. You know, for this poem, it really was kind of, they don't all come like this, but it was this kind of sweep of words that wanted to be written. And then in the taking down of the words, I am changed by that. I've heard other folks, I think Ellen Bass actually, when we were interviewing her for a past program, she said, I know a poem is finished when it has changed me.
Yeah.
Um, and and I feel the same way, or at least I know a poem wants to be written when I feel like there's change on the other side of this, like when I feel that really strong call to write something down, that I need to pause whatever I'm doing and just take a moment to really put the words down. And sometimes it just shows up when I'm sitting right here at my desk, during the regular practice time, that there's just this moment that passed me right by, that was one of those things on the list, and then it sweeps back in when I'm giving it space and time and saying, being opening, basically creating this offering of time and space and saying, come back if you will. If there's anything to come back, come back.
Are you are you aware of who the you is in your poem? Is there a specific you
Hmm. In this poem,
in this poem?
I think that,
I mean, you said your mom, but
yeah, but she was gone. I mean, gone from the earth by the time I wrote it. Um, in some ways, I think it's written, in a very general way. I don't know if there's a specific you, um, to maybe anyone who's struggling. Because I think there are certain times when it's hard to remember that we have been touched or held tenderly, whether it's other people or the world itself,
yeah,
and to believe that, you know, we are broken for that, or we are unhealable, that that's irreconcilable.
yeah.
Yeah. And thank you, Michelle. I think the poem is for all of us. It's for me, myself, when I'm in those places, and it's for anyone else who's in that place as well.
Hmm. Yeah. I felt it was for me.
It
I
was.
took it personally.
It was.
Um, well, maybe I'll share one about how, I think that there is in us, maybe like you were saying, this longing to help someone else. Aaron Abeda, one of my favorite poets, says he writes poems to save other people's lives. I
Mm,
write poems to save lives, he says.
mm,
I remember the first time he said that, I heard him say that, I thought, wow. I was kind of floored by it. Then I thought about how many poems had saved my life.
mm,
Well, really only a handful, but they mattered. I mean, they they were there when I needed them, right?
Right.
And then so what a beautiful reason to write a poem. Um, but I'm thinking about how we do have a longing to make change, to create change, and how we can be so discouraged by, well, what can I really do? We look at what's happening in Gaza, we look at in Ukraine, we look at in our own country, in our own backyard, in our own self. We
Mm,
think, what can I do? Um, Now I'm flipping through poems to find the poem.
okay.
Here it is. Uh, it's called Bioluminescence. Sometimes when I fear the small light I bring isn't big enough or bright enough, I think of that night on the beach years ago when every step I took in the cool, wet sand turned a glowing, iridescent blue, and the waves themselves were a flashing greenish hue. Imagine we could do what 7.9 billion one-celled plankton can do. Can shine when it's dark, can shine when agitated, can shine with our own inner light, and trust when we all bring the tiny light we have, it's enough to illumine the next step in the long stretch of night.
Mm, mm. I'm really seeing those lit up footsteps. It's amazing.
Yeah. And just, I love that they're one-celled plankton, right? They, they're, it's enough, like, imagine that one, it probably isn't thinking, what can I do to change the world? Maybe it is. Maybe,
Maybe.
probably not. But just to think then how when we all bring what we have, we all bring that little bit of light.
Oh,
As Karen says, no, we all take it personally, right? We all want to um just bring that. If we all do that, that's change. That's real change. That's transformation. That's how
yeah.
that happens.
Yeah. And it's by using what we have, or, I think also doing what we're called to do, those one-celled, was it plankton? They are called to light themselves. That's what they're meant to do. That's what they're made to do. And it just makes me think of that Howard Thurman quote. Don't ask what the world needs, ask what brings you alive, something like that, and go and do that because the world needs more people who have been brought alive. Um, yeah, I think that's a beautiful notion. And I think we get discouraged because in the grand scheme, we're all one-celled and we all feel like, well, my little bit of light is too small, not enough, right? Whether it's writing a poem or sharing a poem or publishing a book, I think sometimes these are all amazing things, but we can forget the effect that they have. And, we all have a handful of poems that have saved our lives. And even if they're not the poems we come back to always, 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 I think, Rosemary, you've written so many poems that have saved my life in a single moment. And there are so many, I've put together books of poems that have saved my life in that moment or, long after. And so I just think we never really know what that effect is going to be on someone else. And so why not share what we have? Why not light up?
Why not share what we have? I love that you say that too, James. Thanks for bringing in that quote because I think we all know what it's like when we see someone doing what they're sharing, what it is theirs to share, right? This is how I see Jacob Collier making music, and I just want to, like, I feel every part of me go, love it because he's just so clearly doing what he's made to do. It's just so,
Mm,
so exciting when someone's out there putting their heart into the world, shining heart first in and just
mm,
vulnerably, authentically, enthusiastically, tenderly. You know,
mm,
here's what I have to offer. Whatever it is, music or baking or gardening or listening or you know,
kind gesture, not stealing someone's seats in the cafe.
it could just be a small kindness, like
No, it's so true, though. It is so true. I don't want to downplay the profundity of that. Just those small gestures. And I think we just need those reminders over and over again that it is the small, seeing small, and those small things that make all the difference. Can I read a poem along those lines? Okay. Um, this one is from Telling My Father, my book, and it's called Fireflies. Some insights come like lightning, blinding and fierce, while others arrive as firefly flashes that brighten only an inch or so of air around them. Yet even these can gather power if given time. Like the summer night, I woke and stood at the window to watch all that pulsing outside, like thousands of prayers flaring up above the houses, saying here and here and here as I made my way down the stairs, using only the light of those small bodies to guide me. Fireflies.
I love that poem. I've used it to teach quite a few times.
Thank you.
Just thinking about the light, the different qualities of light, how we're led forward in the world, how we let ourselves be led, how we choose to show up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I just had this vision, it's hard to explain these moments sometimes of, whatever prayer is for you or whatever love is for you when you send it out, just that, we I know the biology of the fireflies is not as nice as this, but that when we send that light out, that it feels small, it is small maybe, but it can gather power. And so I really, yeah, I really resonated with that image when it came to me, like just those thousands of prayers flaring up above the houses, that we're each always sending those out when we're doing our best to live in that space of openness and offering that you put it so well earlier.
Mhm. And there it is in the space of openness and offering. So, as we're kind of coming full circle around, how do we meet change? What is it to become the becoming? That the more openness that's available to us, that we are willing to, I think it can be multiple things, but the more open we are, the more easily we become the becoming.
Mm,
The
right.
more easily we can desire the change.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Friends, we'll keep talking, but this would be a great time. Oh my goodness, there's all kinds of notes in the Q&A. Let's take a peek and see what's there.
Mm,
Um, Oh, James, maybe you want to say something about, I thought we were going to be sent poems. I never found them.
Oh, that was a mistake on my part. That was from another email, but I will send them to you through Eventbrite if I can, if it will let me send attachments. It wasn't something for the webinar specifically. Um, this was just like a little, a little offering.
Let's see. M. Freeman says, wonder if you'd each talk a bit about your daily poetry practice.
Yeah. Well, I do write daily, and I guess I probably average a poem a day, but Rosemary is far more disciplined and open enough to share those poems with everyone, um, which I admire. But I do try to write every single day, and I do try to have an appointed time. For me, it's in the morning, but it could be any time, like just whenever I'm feeling the most alone and in touch with the world. Um, and then I just write in my notebook until I get to a few pages, basically. And sometimes those are poems, essays, sometimes they are complaints, plans, stresses, anxieties, all of it. And that is basically my practice. And of course, drawing poems out that feel like they want to have a larger life that I'm resonating with more, and then revising those. Um, but I really love writing by hand. That is one thing for me. I don't have a special pen, and I just use a plain old spiral notebook, but I like writing by hand. It's like one of the few physical things we have, I feel like, to really stay in touch with what we create.
Gosh, that's inspiring. You're making me think I should write by hand some more. I don't write by hand anymore.
Mm,
Um, and I was thinking, I'm teaching a class about poetry as ritual in January. So I was thinking a lot about rituals and writing, and I realized it's less about, for me, the, it's not like I light a candle and I sit in the same spot and no, then I write with the same pen and no. Um, I feel like really the daily ritual, if we're going to say, is about showing up,
mhm,
and about showing up, and is it inviting the self to open, or willing the self to open, or just wondering, just letting myself be curious? What's here? What's here? What's here? What's outside? What's inside? I usually write at night. It's really nice that we're exact, that we've got some really strong opposites, so that it's clear that whatever works for one person isn't what works for another person,
mhm,
right? We all learn what works
sure.
best for us. I almost always write late at night. I almost always write right into the computer.
Mm,
Um, I like to write when my inner critic is almost asleep, so
mm,
it can't be too vociferous. And I feel like there's this sweet blurriness that happens then, where I'm just a little more available to the world, and
mm,
you know, and fall asleep sometimes even. But I think that there's that allows for this openness that I'm not always available to first thing in the morning,
mm.
or even in the middle of the day. Um, Shelley says different writing rituals with the same beautiful results. I mean, I think what you and I could agree on, correct me if I'm wrong, is that at the heart of a daily practice is just a wonderment,
Mm,
and a curiosity, and a willingness to see what's here, and to stay with it until something happens, not necessarily something good, not necessarily
mm.
something that's precious,
Yeah.
but just something that feels like, oh, this, I'll follow this. What's here right now with this?
Yeah, it does feel like a following to me. That I've grown to really love the word available. Like, as a synonym for that openness that we're talking about tonight, just being available to whatever comes. And really, I don't know if it's just who I am, but I really like to just let words carry me away. And so I really enjoy just reading like little essays. Like Mark Nepo is a favorite to read in the morning because his essays and writing and poems are very just metaphor rich. So they offer all these different frames and ways of seeing the world. And I just, or even like quotes from someone writing a quote, and then I can just kind of let that take me somewhere. I love going where I didn't expect to go.
Mhm.
And I often say that if I had a dime for every time I wrote, even in my notebook, like, wow, I was really surprised that that came today. I can't believe I didn't feel like writing a poem, or I didn't think anything was going to show up. Um, so I think just really trusting that and being really available to what comes in, because I think you eventually train yourself to listen to the whispers and to listen to those really small moments, those micro moments that come to us throughout the day, even as avenues of exploration or curiosity. Like I'm thinking of your chemical composition poem and the catalyst and learning the process of that. Like that's a seed, that's a path that you were given to explore. And so, just getting curious enough to, you don't have to read everything that was ever written about chemical reactions, just to know how it works.
Mhm. I love the way you say this, James, that we train ourselves to listen to the whispers. And I don't think that I just this week I was talking to someone else who I think is, well, at any rate, I was talking to someone else and she was saying how she had given so much of her life to some other projects as opposed to giving her life to poetry. And she realized that that had made a big difference and that those choices she'd made had affected her ability to write poems. And I
Mm,
wanted to argue with her. I wanted to
mm,
say, well, look at now you can, now you can.
mhm,
But as I continued to listen to her, I really understood that she was saying that there were certain neural pathways that hadn't been created or that hadn't been explored. This is what I hear you saying now. And I don't
mm,
mean that they never can be, but she was aware that because she hadn't been doing it in a daily way, she wasn't able to hear the little whispers.
mm,
And I think it's true. I think, and I don't think it, I don't know how long it takes a daily practice or a oftenly practice. Doesn't have to be daily, like you said, but a practice, let's just call it a practice of showing up and listening. The more we do it, the more we can do it, like anything else, like anything else. So it becomes, I think, really thrilling then to think of how possible it is. And I think there was the next question, I think, is something actually now that I'm thinking it's almost this is the answer. I hadn't thought we were going there, but if change is a given in our lives and in our nature, how can we strengthen our resilience so we can more lovingly accept and grow with the changing self and conditions? Thanks, Louise, for this gorgeous question. And I think this is it. I think we practice showing up. And
mm,
I think that writing is a poem of, is exactly that, is a practice in showing up with uncertainty. There's nothing there. It's a blank, right? A practice in showing up with curiosity. What could happen next? A practice in showing up for meeting the truth. What's true now? What's true now? I think
mm,
so. All those things are what form resilience. This is, I think always, James, I know we talk about this all the time and we've said it before, but for me, the practice of writing a poem is so not about the poem, although the
mhm,
poem is the product that comes from it, but the real practice is the showing up and the
mhm,
wonderment and the curiosity and the opening and the availability, as you say. Can I step out into this world lit by fireflies?
mm,
You know,
yeah.
all those thousands of tiny prayers. I think that this is what a daily, well, I keep saying daily. I don't mean to say it. It's just my practice. That's why I say it over and over. But the practice of showing up to write poems is a practice in learning to be resilient, I think.
I think it is also a daily practice. Even if you never write a word, I think what we're talking about and what we're often talking about, Rosemary and I, is this is poetry as a way of life, as a way of living life.
Mhm.
And Naomi Shihab Nye, your life is the poem.
Mm.
That's why we're training ourselves. That's why we do this, not to write the next Pulitzer Prize winner, though that's lovely and accolades and all that are lovely. We're doing this so that we can show up more fully for those little inspirations, for those small moments in our lives when we're feeling a sense of wonder, awe, or openness to what's going on.
Mhm. I saw a couple of people asked about who said they write poems to save lives. It's Aaron Abeyta, Abeyta. Who's like a miracle human. He's
Mm,
the mayor of this tiny little town, Antonito, and founded a school and coaches the football team and poet. I don't know. He's phenomenal. Yeah.
mm.
I'm scanning for other questions. Do you see one that's calling out to you, Jane?
Yeah, I think Paula Lepp was asking us. She says, obviously through poetry, but are there other ways you stubbornly praise? And if so, what are they and how do they inform your writing? That's a
Oh,
great
good
question.
question. All of love, do. Hmm.
Gardening, planting things, walking, hiking. I mean, so much of this, it doesn't sound much like being in the house. It sounds like being out in the world.
Although I would say also baking
Also in the house, though.
and knitting, just having the yarn glide through your hands
Mm,
and and just knot after knot after knot, creating something beautiful.
mm.
Um, those are beautiful answers, James. Yeah, so much of just being outside, being in a garden, going for a walk,
Yeah, being with
conversation.
animals, conversation with others that we really care about, or even strangers, just yeah, connection, physical connection with the world for
I'll tell
sure.
you where I don't stubbornly praise is when I'm driving and then I just turn into a raging lunatic. I say the nastiest things in my car to people who I'm sure are really lovely humans. Why are you going so slow? Why are you going 12 miles under the speed limit? Why didn't you pull over? Yeah, so I think I have a lot of room for improvement.
Mm,
I think I'm just on the stubborn phase. When the instant I
mhm.
get behind the wheel, I'm
Yeah,
gonna need to growing edge.
that's right. Well, let's be honest, driving is no one's favorite task.
Uh, let's see. Hi, Lois. You both are so open and vulnerable and connected with your sense of being alive. How do you deal when a sense of unworthiness or littleness comes into your sense of self? Oh, yeah, all the time. Hello,
Mm,
unworthiness. Hello, littleness. How do you deal, James?
mm, I think I'm still learning. Um, I think I try to have a larger container, try to be as spacious as I can and really turn to those practices. Maybe the writing is bringing on that sense of unworthiness or littleness. And so turning to practices that make me feel more spacious, basically looking for awe, like little moments of awe and just openness, whatever that looks like. And it could be a spiritual practice, like meditation really helps me. But it could be the walking or hiking or talking to, like Julia Cameron calls really trusted friends, your believing mirrors, because they will reflect back to you their belief in you. And I love that image. I love that concept. And it's very true for me.
Yeah. You know, and I think that so often that littleness, that unworthiness comes out of some kind of comparison where we're looking at someone else and we think, oh, well, look at what so and so is able to do, and I can't do that. Um, Boy, there's nothing like walking outside to change the scope, right? Nothing like standing underneath a starry sky to drop all of that,
Mhm.
and just really figure out how small we really are. So, so small and
Mhm.
so everything.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's so
Yeah,
human.
it is. Yeah. I think to see it as very natural and as just a passing thing, that it's going to come in no matter how enlightened we think we might be or want to be. I'm gonna feel unworthy, you know.
Mhm.
I'm gonna feel small next to fill in the blank or whatever. Um, but I think also just not seeing the world as a place of hierarchy either.
Uh-huh.
Like, oh, even the two of us with folks who might be on this call, like, oh, James and Rosemary have done this or have been writing daily for this long. It's like that, no, there's no hierarchy. There's no hierarchy. I think it's just all about that being open to a moment. And I think, you could be open to a moment and be a very beginning writer, and you could still write something that will move millions of
Mhm.
people. It doesn't take much, but it does take that openness and that willingness to be changed
Mhm.
by the world.
And you know what else? I I think there was a while that I was actually embarrassed of how much I'd been influenced by other people or how much I admired other people, or it was almost like I don't, who knows what I was thinking. Who knows? Like it was a problem that I didn't have all original ideas, or I don't know. And then it became this insane sweetness to hold up everyone or everyone who I can think of that's been, who's inspired me, and to write book reviews on Amazon for other poets, or to just like call in other people whose work, like the more I feel like the more I do to lift up other people, the less small I feel, right?
Mm,
Instead of
totally.
feeling like me next to them makes me small, to hold up other people, to look at this brilliant, to share other people's brilliance, and I feel like so, in that way maybe some of their shine, rubs off. I don't know.
It does.
That sounds a
It
little
does.
corny, but there it feels pretty
Mm.
true.
It's like the fireflies, right? Just that a little bit of that glow, that shine rubs off on you. I think it does because you're doing the world a service. And I think we're at our time. I could keep talking to you forever and in this lovely community that we've connected with here. But yeah, what a lovely note to end on, uplifting each other
Yeah.
as a way to just bring more light into the world. I love that.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to all of you for being here with us. This
Thanks,
was like a
everyone.
hug and a lullaby before bed. Thank you.
Thank you, friends.
Bye, everyone.